I promised myself I'd never play this bloody game again, but oh no, you had to come knocking at my door complaining that I played the game wrong. And you may have been right. Well, by that I mean you were all 100% correct. It seems that even after reading the manual and watching a walkthrough of the entire game, I'd missed some fundamental elements that probably put me in a frame of mind that considered the game shit. Now, the saving grace here, for me at least, is that it seems a lot of those who commented, both on YouTube and other social media, fell foul of exactly the same issues. And some of those who hadn't spotted that I'd made mistakes were pretty taken aback by some of these revelations themselves. This, at least, makes me feel a little better, and it brought up some interesting conversation points. I want to read you a comment from a Reddit user named xBrittonStuff, who says, "One thing I'd like to comment on is your difference in perception between when you first played it and now. The obvious response is that you've played a million better games, and now see the lack of challenge in this game. However, I'd say it's equally likely to be something else. Back in 1984, gaming, at home especially, was new, and just simply using the computer and being able to move something around on the screen was exciting." It's a great comment, and it's one of the aspects I do try and balance when I create these reviews. In effect, I'm trying to come at these reviews from about 4 different angles where I can. Number 1, experiential. What were my experiences with the game, if there were any, or what would I have thought of it as a kid? Number 2, comparison. How does it play in comparison to its peers from roughly the same time period? Number 3, consistency. How does it hold up today after 20, 30 years? Number 4, balance. With all of these other aspects in mind, how do I feel about the game overall? If I have nostalgia for the game, is that an overriding factor? If I don't have nostalgia for the game, is that also an overriding factor? Etc, etc, etc. So I try to base my reviews on all of these things while also being mindful of the core audience. People who have continued to stick with the ZX Spectrum for a huge length of time. People who hold these games very, very close to their heart. And people who, for instance, know how to play Ghostbusters better than I do. Which leads me back to the game. I've just finished playing through it to the end. Again. Using my newly gained knowledge from comments in the last video by The Highlander, whose channel you should also check out and subscribe to, by the way, I made sure that I only moved on the overworld map when necessary. I made sure to drive over the encroaching ghosts as much as I could. I made sure to mash the B button down to a nub whenever that bastard marshmallow fellow came anywhere near me. I got to the end, found myself at the door to Zool, and spent a long time pondering how this tiny marshmallow idiot managed to crush an entire building. Look at him! He looks as destructive as a dewy blade of grass. After being confused initially by the fact that I sent in about 100 Ghostbusters and the next event wouldn't trigger, I realised that it was actually glitching out a bit. If you move your Ghostbusters too far to the left, Marshmallow Man doesn't hit them on his descent. This seemed like the perfect tactic until I realised that I wasn't actually sending the men into the building. They were just sort of glitching back out again. Once I figured out that you have to sort of aim diagonally into the building, job was a good one and I beat the game. Now, I've completed it, and I played with the full knowledge provided to me by you wonderful people. Has my opinion of the game actually changed? Yes. Sort of. Here's the thing. A lot of my misgivings with the game were centered around a few areas. That was my boredom in the map screen, my boredom in the driving, and my boredom in the ghost catching, and that these areas never really changed throughout. That opinion is roughly unchanged, though my enjoyment has improved a lot. On the map screen, finding a short route to take while copying as many ghosts as possible is definitely an improvement over simply waiting for a flashing building, though again, there were multiple times on the screen where I was sat waiting with absolutely nothing going on. The driving segment's still a complete yawn fest, but reducing the amount I drove definitely shortened the journey and almost quashed my complaints with it. I just feel like if any part of the game could be overhauled, I'd love it to be this part. The ghost capturing was much the same as last time, although weirdly I did enjoy this slightly more than my first playthrough, possibly because I was tainted by the extreme boredom of experience by playing the game wrong. What I would have loved to have seen, however, is a few different types of ghosts with their own unique patterns. Perhaps this wasn't possible with the limited memory available, but it's definitely my main issue with this section. There is no change to the routine. So look, I don't score games because, especially when it comes to games this old, I find the whole process of assigning an arbitrary number pretty pointless. However, in the case of my first review on Ghostbusters, if I had, it would have been the lowest of scores when I came out at the other end. I feel like I'd just forced my way through a bout of depression when I emerged at the end. On this second playthrough, I genuinely got through it without even an inkling of boredom. I wasn't particularly engaged, so to speak, but I certainly wasn't watching the clock. So here's my final stance on the game. If you play it wrong, it's proper shit. If you play it correctly, it's a lot better. It's not an excellent game, but it's certainly not as bad as I'd originally come to declare. I could take my original review down, but honestly, it all comes down to point one for me on this. Experiential. As far as my process goes, when I return to these games from 30 years gone, I go through a blind playthrough first. I want to experience the games the way I would have played them as a kid, and that way was to look at the screenshots on the back of the box, throw the game into the cassette deck and try to figure out what the hell was going on without so much as glancing at the instructions. After an initial fumbling, I'd then read up on the game, probably while sat on the toilet. I'll then thumb my way through the manual and lastly, if required, find a walkthrough. And that's usually as far as the game needs. But Ghostbusters was a bit special. Ghostbusters instead needed a community of players to come together and tell me of their own experiences to explain to me what I'd done wrong. Because I couldn't, for once, find the information elsewhere. For a brief moment, it felt like being back in the schoolyard, like sharing experiences of a game with one another and realizing, holy shit, you can actually do that. So, I've changed the title of my original review of Ghostbusters to Ghostbusters Played Badly Review, because it is, in essence, a review of the game when played from that perspective, but also because I don't want to shy away from the fact I made a complete mistake in the first place. While I was annoyed at myself for having uploaded something that was, well, wrong, I think I got more out of the upload than I otherwise would if I hadn't uploaded the video. I would have written the game off forevermore and would spend the rest of my life with the tainted opinion that the game was a steaming pile of ectoplasm. So anyway, to summarise, I'm glad to be wrong. And in the words of the late, great Harold Ramis,
Ghostbusters was a good thing for kids to play.